Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Lens of Truth with me, Ave Florentino, and for today's video, I've been doing a lot of unboxings and just showing off all of my video game collections, and I just did one since the Wii U and the 3DS eShops are finally closed. So here is my collection of my 3DS games. And I do have an entire playlist on my channel of all things unboxings, tier lists, and collections. And I do have a lot more coming with my GameCube collection, Wii games, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo DS. And although this library is really small, I really enjoyed all of the games that I have and played over the years. But before we get started, if you're new to my channel, hit that like button, ring the bell, leave a comment, and let's get to it.
The Nintendo 3DS will be available in Aqua Blue and Cosmo Black. There are two screens. The touchscreen on the bottom provides console controls and the larger 3D display on top. In 2D mode, it displays visuals like no portable before, but in 3D, it takes games to an entirely new level. The 3D images make you feel like you're in another world. The 3D depth slider lets you adjust the amount of 3D that you want to see. Control is totally customizable and never requires you to put on a pair of those fashionable 3D glasses.
So here's a brief history of the Nintendo 3DS. So this is a foldable dual screen handheld. It was announced in March 2010 and released in the beginning of early 2011. The basic design is built off of the DS. It retains a clamshell design, backwards compatibility for the DS software, but now it includes audio stereoscopic 3D visuals that does not require any special glasses. And it is part of the 8th generation console. It was viewed as very expensive for a handheld console. Now, when the system initially launched at the price of $249.99, but 6 months later it was reduced to $169.99 with its disappointing launch sales. Players were even given the Ambassador program where they were gifted a lot of Game Boy Advance games for early adopters. And things started turning around with big first-party IPs like Super Mario 3D Land, Mario Kart 7, and more. And they later released many iterations like the Nintendo 3DS XL, which I actually own and waited for a bigger version because I never owned the original. And they even made a Nintendo 2DS which completely removed the 3D display. Alright, so for my first 3DS game, this is actually a very rare and special one that I have not opened and I will not open because this one is a Nintendo 3DS Guide Through the Louvre.
割と迷わないでしょ。この今地図、そのエリアに行くと勝手にこうガイドが出て、こうしてずっと自分が
You've now reached the first masterpiece on our tour, the Venus de Milo.
これ
Now, I got this game back in 2018 when my cousin and I went to Paris, France, and we ended up visiting the Louvre, and we both bought a copy for ourselves. So if you do want to see that video unboxing and me talking about the history of the Nintendo 3DS Guide Through the Louvre, go ahead and check out that video. It's a really cool one that I've been wanting to edit for a long time, and I finally released it a few months ago. So this was more of an educational type of supplement when you're visiting a museum like the Louvre, which is huge, and this one cannot be bought anymore. So I'm glad I still have this one. Now this game is one of my most played games on the 3DS, and it's Kid Icarus Uprising.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
This is such a good game. Hopefully there's a HD remaster, complete remake in the future for this, because we definitely need it. And I did an entire unboxing of this last year, so go ahead and check that out. And one last thing that I have to add about this game is that if you owned it, you know how great the online multiplayer was. You were able to duke it out in 4-player modes, and it ran super smooth with a lot of modes, weapons, and it was so customizable. So this is one area that I know can easily be expanded on if they were ever to make a remaster. And a classic remake, Star Fox 64 3D, is a must-have game. Remade textures, music, and although the voice acting is not as good as the original, this is a must-have early 3DS game. Now, New Super Mario Bros. 2 was an okay game when it came out, but the thing that made it better was the actual paid DLC that you were able to buy, which made the levels a lot more interesting and a lot more difficult. Now this is the game that you want your 3D cranked all the way up. It's Super Mario 3D Land. This one was made specifically for the 3DS, and it's a must-have 3D action platformer. So when Super Mario 3D Land was released in 2011, it was met with critical acclaim. It was praised for its creative gameplay, level design, and the utilization of the stereoscopic 3D, which was heavily part of the Nintendo 3DS. And it was one of the reasons to own a Nintendo 3DS at the time. And it was one of the first 3DS games to sell over 5 million copies. And although the levels were short, it was also meant to bridge the gap between the 2D Super Mario games and the 3D ones. Metroid Federation Force gets a lot of hate, but if you did end up playing it with friends, random people online, it really was a solid Metroid experience. Some frustrating moments here and there, but if you are able to find it cheap, check it out. It really was bad timing when we didn't get any Metroid games at all. But one that needs no debate is Metroid Samus Returns. Yes, this game is really tough, and Metroid Dread did make a lot more improvements, but this is the blueprint for the smooth controlling Samus that we have in Metroid Dread. Now, Resident Evil Revelations looked amazing when it first came out on the 3DS with its online mode, and it was really creepy as well. Now, The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes is another game that had iffy online and rough single player if you didn't have people to play with, but the thing that made it worth it was those boss battles. That's probably the only saving grace that this game had, even though some of the environments were pretty fun. Now, Majora's Mask 3D had great things with it, with remade camera angles, music, graphics, but the controversy was the terrible eyeballs in a lot of those bosses. Having played the original, that was probably the worst mistake that they did, but there was a lot of quality of life features that made the game better in some ways. Now, one of the best games on the 3DS for a Zelda game is The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. This is a direct sequel to the SNES: A Link to the Past. This was a must-have game. You guys have to check it out. It has great dungeon design, great bosses, great use of the 3D effect, and also gave you the freedom to tackle the dungeons in almost any order, and also the rental system for the weapons, which slowly moved on to what we have now as the Breath of the Wild, where we have complete freedom from the beginning. And The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time 3D is actually even better than Majora's Mask for a full-on remake of the N64 classic. Everything from quality of life improvements, the graphics, the sound, this is one that you have to have in your library. Now, Ghost Recon Shadow Wars was a game that my brother randomly bought. I didn't even know this game existed, but once I checked it out, it's a great strategy shooter. So I would recommend going to YouTube and checking out some few videos if you are interested in this type of a game, but it was actually very solid and fun. Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate. It's a great action 3DS game because it was actually the team that eventually made Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread. Although not perfect, this one had great boss battles and great action. As for Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, this was the harder version of the two that was released. This is a must recommend Fire Emblem game for the hardcore versus Fire Emblem Fates Birthright, which is a lot easier, but both of them still had great storylines, and when you complete both of them, there's a third chapter that has the full final ending. Although I didn't like how they did this, trying to be almost like the Pokemon games, these were still some solid Fire Emblem titles. Now, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is a remake of an old Fire Emblem game, and this one had differences in that you're able to walk around some of the environments and trigger the strategy RPG battles. So it was a fun surprise of a remake. Now, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon does get a lot of hate because of the way that it's broken down in the gameplay department and it's mission based, but besides all that, it was a fun, solid game and the visuals look great. Now, Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS surprised me because it runs at 60 frames per second. That is insane. And even the online was solid, especially when you're playing one-on-one. I can't believe that this game runs as great as it does. This is a must-have for your 3DS. And it still amazes me that you have a great fighter on a handheld. For my last game, Kirby Planet Robobot is probably one of the last 3DS games I ever purchased, and this was a solid Kirby game. Out of all the ones that released on the 3DS and even some on the Switch and Wii U, this was probably one of the most creative ones besides Kirby and the Forgotten Land. For this 2D style Kirby game, this one, they really innovated everything because of the mechanical robot nature. This was a must-have game if you haven't already tried it out. So there we go, that was my entire 3DS collection. Although it's not big, I feel like I have a lot of the solid must-have 3DS titles. I do have a few digital games on my 3DS as well. But yeah, let me know down in the comment section below which 3DS games are your favorites. And thank you for watching, see you later, and bye-bye.